hello to all our listeners again. It's Steve Cummings. I'm the managing partner at Rizolve Partners, and I'd like to bring along today, once again, my erstwhile partner, Bob Kirillia. Bob, we issued a great blog today, and I thought that would be great material for our discussion today. And the blog was entitled "The Psychology of the Business Exit: What No One Tells You About Selling Your Business." And it makes some really great points. And I'd really like to get your point of view, and maybe contribute as well, but get your point of view on some of these interesting points that come up on the psychology of business owners when they're going through an exit. And it really is very important, in my opinion. So let's just start from the top. So here's what people need to know. So the first proposition is that your business is part of your identity, and the realization of what that means to business owners on their way out to transition to their next act. What do you think about that, Bob?
Well, there's no doubt. You think about it. Entrepreneurs start with an idea, they build that idea into a company, they grow their company, they get it to a point, over a number of years, it could be over an entire career, where they're ready to transition out of that business. But you think about it, that business has been part of their life every day. Virtually every decision that they've made has incorporated, an idea of how that business could grow. And again, entrepreneurs, I think, are a very proud, lot who are proud of the fact that they've created a business. So it really does become a part of them. They've chosen that life for a reason, and it's very much a part of your personality, being an entrepreneur. And so when you do go through a transition, you're really, parting with a key component of what's made you.
I think that's right. I mean, business owners can feel like they're losing a part of themselves in transitioning, away from the business. What we're really talking about here is the emotional fallout of selling your business. It can be kind of like a death, or a part death, to some business owners, and that's a practical, a reality, an emotional element to the deal that really does need thinking through ahead of the transaction, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, most people think this is all about numbers and this is all about transition and project management and all that. And yes, that's a big part of when you're selling your company. There's no doubt, but it's that emotional component that people don't think about, and it's going to create stresses. It's going to create, joys through the whole process, but definitely there's an emotional aspect to this that a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, I think the tip here, Bob, is that, business owners need to start separating themselves away from the business well ahead of the transaction, and creating a life for themselves, an interest, a purpose outside of the building. Creating hobbies, new relationships, goals outside of work, and so on and so forth. So really great kickoff point there. The second point in the blog is the emotional roller coaster that is very real. The business owners are subjected to.
Oh yeah, and that's definitely, first of all, a transition does not take place in a matter of a week. It's a matter of months, sometimes could even be as long as a year. And over that period of time, you're going to have emotional highs, you're going to have emotional lows. It's exciting when you're putting the business up for sale and you're seeing that your life work is now going to, come to fruition in terms of a big payday. But then there's that whole waiting period as you wait for the process to take place, and then you wait to see who's interested in your company. And then you get an emotional high when someone makes an offer and it looks like a great offer, but that then can you can hit an emotional low when you're going through due diligence and they're tearing apart, every aspect of the company and asking a lot of very pointed questions. And so this is over that period of time, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, you're going to be seeing lots of ups and lots of lows. And sometimes the low is just you're eager to now go through the transition. You've made the decision to sell the company. You want it to happen, but the process itself just slows you down. And you know that entrepreneurs are not patient. If they were patient, they wouldn't be entrepreneurs. They started their company because they saw an opportunity and they wanted to go for it, and that's what made them successful. So the fact that a transition might take 6 to 12 months, that in itself can be a challenge for an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, there's a deeper emotional undercurrent to all this that goes on. And, fear of the unknown, sadness over leaving the team, or guilt about stepping away. That needs to be reconciled, ahead of time, because it really does, it really does cut you down. So what's the tip here? The tip here is get good advisors who know where the potholes in the road are. Get good advice. Surround yourself with good advisors in order to help you through those highs and lows of the emotion of the transaction.
Yeah.
For sure. The third point we make in the blog is a really, really interesting one as well, because there's very rarely a clean break, is there? The transaction doesn't necessarily, you don't kind of waltz off into the sunset on the date of the transaction often.
Yeah, and that's one that people have to be ready for. It's interesting, right? We always counsel our prospective clients to understand that a process is going to take time. The preparation, getting the company ready can take 2 to 3 years. The actual transaction itself can take a year. But then, as you say, there's there's rarely that clean break, because depending on how the deal is structured, you as the owner may be required to stay on board for a period of 6 months or 12 months or even longer. And you may be coming on board in a leadership role just so that the transition can go smoothly. Or you might be there as an advisor and available to give counsel, so that, again, it's all about having a clean transition. And the deal may be structured as well, that there's a tail end to this, that you get paid, on the day the transaction goes through, you get paid, but there could be a 1 year or 2 year payout depending on how you structure the deal. So a clean break is rare. I think perhaps in a strategic, when it's a strategic sale or a sale to a strategic buyer, it might be a cleaner break. But for the most part, you should expect that you're going to be involved in at least 6 months in an advisory capacity, if nothing else.
Yeah, there's a transition period that could be months or even years, like you say, depending on whether there's an earnout to be gone through. So I mean, I think the tip here for business owners is to set clear boundaries as you go through the deal as to what your wants in the deal are. But there should be an expectation that there is often a handover period. I think that's reasonable. The question is how long, and how sustainable is the company in another pair of hands.
Yeah.
And there lies the issue. So there often isn't a clean break. So business owners need to be to prepare for that or negotiate.
Well, and that's a great point, because this is all part of the negotiation, right? And you'll go through the negotiation on price and transition and so on and so forth, but that transition period after the sale is negotiable. So I think it's important for an entrepreneur to know where do they want to land? Are they willing to give 6 months? Are they willing to give 12 months after the sale goes through? If so, put your stake in the ground and negotiate around that. I think it's all part of that planning process, and it really comes back to having good advisors who are going to lead you through that.
Yeah. I think the other one, the next one, is the fact that relationships shift during the transaction. Some relationships will strengthen, some relationships will be strained. spouses, children, business partners, employees all experience those ripple effects, do they not?
Yeah, you think about it, the relationship, again, as an entrepreneur, whether you're a solo entrepreneur or you've got partners, you've been the key decision maker, for some time in the business. And the day that the transition goes through, all of a sudden that relationship changes. You're not necessarily that key decision maker anymore. And I'm not saying that you're yesterday's news, but what I'm saying is that all of a sudden you've got new relationships that you've got to germinate. There could be other senior leaders in the organization. For the first time in a long time, perhaps ever, you've got the people that have bought the company, you've got to report to them. So that's a change in relationship. Your key employees may now be reporting to somebody beside you as you go through this transition. So that changes as well. And you've got to be careful not to overstep your boundaries. And again, the whole family relationship changes. When mom or dad are now more available, that changes the relationship at home. So it really does, you've got to be ready that the relationships that you've got and the way you've done your run the business is going to change as you go through this transition.
Yeah, it's, and sometimes the surprising thing is how quickly those relationships change. Sometimes that can be a real eye opener, as people transition on to new bosses and so on. So, I mean, the tip here, Bob, is to communicate openly with your inner circle. Make sure that you're as transparent as possible with the changes that are going to happen. So communication is the key, I
Yep.
think, on that
Well,
particular.
and I think it's important that as an entrepreneur, you embrace those changing relationships. You've gone through this process for a reason. You've had a successful transition. You're in the process now. Embrace it, work, with it. You want this to be successful on behalf of the people that bought your company, on behalf of the employees, on behalf of your clients and your customers. You want to make sure that you're embracing these new relationships so that you're guaranteeing the success.
I think the next one is an interesting one to be very cognizant of, and that's the bewaring the post exit void. That the void that occurs. You've transitioned your company. It's been your life for the last 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden there is a void that opens up, and how do you see that one?
Well, that's an interesting one, right? You've got to have a plan, not only a financial plan, but you've got to have a plan as to what do you do with your life. You've run a business that has been a large part of your day in, day out existence. And now that is going to be gone. That is now going to be transitioned to another ownership group. So you've got to have a plan, because when you wake up on the next Monday morning at 6:30, as you always have, and you normally maybe take a look at your phone to see what's going on or what's going on, you need to now have another plan so that you're not wondering, okay, what's my next what's the next chapter in my book. And that's all part of the planning process that you need to put in place. And it's not something that you put in place a week before the transition. You think about it, we all, as entrepreneurs think, boy, when I retire or when I leave this business, what will I do next? Will I, get into philanthropy? Will I play a lot of golf? Will I write that book that I've always wanted to write? Well, it's important for you to think about that in advance, because you're now at that stage of your life and you don't want to go through the whole transition and then say, now what?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about a sense of purpose in the in the post exit period. If you're getting up in the morning and wondering, what the day looks like, and there's potential for that sense of purpose to not be there, and we've seen it before. Not everybody, but we've seen it before. That post exit depression, unhappiness, occurs, and something definitely to be aware of. and start your planning. Start your planning on your next act. Start it early. Talk to your family and your partner and so on, and well before the sale, so that you kind of mitigate that post exit void, which will happen. You want to fill it
Yep.
in somewhat before you get there.
Well, and think about it. I mentioned, playing golf. It's a sort of the always, the standard response. Oh, I'm going to go play golf 5 days a week. Well, will you? Are you seriously going to play golf 5 days a week?
Yeah.
You've been an active manager of a successful business, and now you're going to go play golf 5 times a week. Maybe for the first couple of weeks, but probably not in the long term. And of course, up here in Canada, 7 months out of the year, you're not playing golf at any time.
Well,
so, what are you going to do during those spaces? You really do have to have a number of different things that you've always been interested in or that you want to be interested in, and that you're now going to take them on because you now have the time and you now have the financial wherewithal to make it happen.
Yeah. I mean, how many times have we seen, people say, I want to travel the world when I retire. I want to go off. I want to play golf. I want to do this. I want to do that. Sometimes the grass is always greener with those types of objectives. And you kind of do it a few times, you do it several times, you do it multiple times. And after a while, the elation starts to dim a little bit. And what we're really talking about here is more of a longer term aspirational, what is my purpose in life? How am I going to fill my time? Not just for the next 12 months, but over the longer term.
Yeah.
So the next one is an interesting one, is redefining what success means. When you've been in a business, you earn a good salary, you make profits in the company, you grow revenue, you make people happy at work as part of a team. All of that is what success looks like in the business fraternity. But what does that mean in the post-exit world? What does success look like?
That's a really good question, and it's certainly tied to the previous point about avoiding that post-exit void. What does success look like? Well, I think that's part and parcel. When you put your plan together, you have to say, okay, I'm going to be doing this. Let's assume it is golf, and you want to play golf 3 times a week. Well, set some goals as to what do you want to achieve in your golf game. Do you want to improve it? Do you want to keep it the same? Do you want it to be a social, activity? If so, set your goals and say, this is what I'm going to try to achieve. I know for me personally, I've got a thought that, one day when I leave Rizolve Partners, I want to go back to university and I want to, get a degree. And I even know what that degree is going to be. It's going to be in history. So my measure of success will be achieving, that degree, and obviously, getting good marks and so on and so forth. But think about it, that sounds like a very honorable thing to do. But think about it, that's 3 years. What do you do after that? So you've got to really be thinking long term, right? I'm not going to go become a college professor. That's not part of my plan. But what do I do after that next step? So you really do have to think long term, and that's where you have to bring your family together and friends and so on, and say, let's plan something, because hopefully you've got a long, happy life after you sell the company. You want to make sure that you're measuring your success in a way that you can be proud of it, and it's going to be very different than the way you've measured success when you had the business.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the business owners have got to reflect on their values and their goals and what truly matters to them, in their life beyond the business, and what sort of deeper purpose are you does your life serve, maybe there's some instructional things that can come out of that reflection there. So we always preach at Rizolve, the power of preparation. I mean, that's where we help business owners who maybe don't know where to start in terms of that preparation, and that is okay. because they've got a busy life and so on. But there's emotional challenges in that preparation as well, Bob, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you've got to bring the right advisors to the table early so that they can help you prepare. We've said this in other podcasts, we always preach know your number. When you sell your company, know the number that you need to get. And what does that number entail? That number will allow you to do the things after you've sold the company that you've always wanted to do. So, if you wanted to get into philanthropy and so on, and that's going to be, that's going to fill the void, and, success, in that regard is going to be how you measure yourself in the future. Well, that's where all of these things tie together. You need to know the number that you need to get out of the sale of your company so that you're able to achieve all these things. And you need to have the right advisors with you early on in the process so they can help you make sure that you achieve the number, that you understand what you're going to do afterwards, that you avoid the void, and that you know how you're going to measure success for the next 20, 30 years after you sell the company. Yeah. All very important.
The business community always talks about maximizing value, and that certainly is a laudable objective for sure. But I'll turn that on its head a little bit. At Rizolve, we talk about the happiness quotient post exit and maximizing fulfillment. Are you satisfied with your lifetime's achievement? Mm-hmm. Did you protect the legacy? Is the legacy that you built an ongoing phenomena? Has it been retained into the future? And solidifying those things through the exit is creating fulfillment. And we certainly want to encourage our business owners to reflect on what's going to make them happy. Have they achieved their lifetime's ambitions, and so on and so forth. So I think the tip here is to engage with an advisory group on holistic planning that's not just business financial focus, but is focused on your personal objectives, your personal wealth quotient, your happiness, mm-hmm. What's going to lead you through to living the rest of your life out with confidence and a smile on your face. So, Bob, we've talked about some wonderful things there. We've dealt a little bit deeper on the objectives of the personal objectives of the exit process. Any final thoughts?
No, I think you wrapped it up really well. I think it's a conversation, though, that we need to continue to have. Like you say, we always focus on building value and maximizing the value out of the sale of a company, but you've got to make sure that all these pieces are in place. And I think this is a conversation that we will have on a regular basis, certainly with our clients and with our listeners, just because it's such an important factor to take into account when you're going through a transition is what happens after the transition. Great, you might be sitting, you might have achieved your number, but have you got all the things in place that will allow you to truly benefit and be satisfied with that next stage of your life? An important part of the planning process. Need to get to it early, and again, I think a topic that we'll come back to again and again.
Yeah. Selling your business is definitely one of the most significant decisions business owners are going to take in their lifetime. And what we're really highlighting here is that it's a deeply personal journey that they're going to go on, and they are going to need not just financial advisors around the advisory table, but personal financial advisors and people who can help them through the highs and lows of the process. So Bob, thank you very much for your wise comments today. I'm sure they were helpful to people, and we look forward to doing our next podcast in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you.
No, that sounds great. Thanks, Steve. We'll talk to you soon.